Welcome to After the Arena, presented by Under Armour. I'm Victoria Arlen alongside Jason Fitz and Skubie Mageza. We just finished watching episode 5 of Man of the Arena, and we're here to break it all down with you. So, fellas, what did we think about this episode? First thoughts on episode 5 of Man in the Arena.
I mean, it's the constant evolution of Tom Brady, right? But it mirrors sort of what everybody goes through in life. And I couldn't help but watch this episode as we get more of a sight of like who he is as a family man and like Gisele and all of that. And think back to, I think it was episode 2 when he was talking about everybody's living downtown Boston. They're all out. He's not taking care of himself. Like the transformation that so many people go through. Like, you know, I always talked about this when I used to live in Nashville around the music industry, that so many people move there and in their 20s, they're just partying in every bar and they're like, this is great. And then they wake up in their 30s and they're like, I can't sustain this. I think we saw a little bit of that from Tom Brady here. And, you know, it's the next yellow brick road path that we're following that has taken us to these, you know, the version of Tom we have today. And like, I think that's been the coolest thing is this evolution, Scooby.
Yeah, I think this was like the final evolution of Tom Brady. Like, you know, in Pokemon, they got 3 different versions. Like, this is Charizard. It starts off with him talking about the resilience, you know, what he has to go through. And he brings, you know, he talks about resilience means to continuously overcome. You don't know what's going to come out of it personally, professionally, in a game, in practice, injuries. You're going to have to be able to adapt to your situation and be able to adjust to the change in scenery. And that's what he had to do after the Super Bowl. And I think, you know, we really learned a lot about Tom Brady throughout this episode, especially when he just, another fire got lit in him. Remember that spark in the last episode, we talked about it, him losing that Super Bowl. And in this episode, he really got lit in the flame because he got those runner-up rings. And when he got those runner-up rings, he was like, man, like, I need to get back. And Gisele, man, I'm a fan. I've never really heard Gisele talk this much. When she bust in there and she was like, dude, let's be honest. Behind every strong man, there's a strong woman. I was like, oh, she's in the house.
I mean, and can we just acknowledge like Tom's life? Like Tom makes the fun money in that house. Like Gisele actually is the breadwinner. He makes the honey, let's go on vacation money. Like Tom Brady is the honey, let's go on vacation money. Like what? Oh, Gisele's hitting at a different level.
Well, being introduced. Yeah, well, that was, I think, the two is the thing that was really awesome about this episode is we're introduced to Gisele and together, Tom and Gisele are one of the most famous couples in the world. And we learned about how their relationship started with a blind date set up by mutual friends to the couple building a family. You know, what was really awesome was Gisele is seen as Brady's biggest supporter on and off the field. And so I want to ask you guys, what can be said?
Wait, you just buried the lead. You buried the lead. What mutual friend is looking at their book of friends and being like, oh, Brady and Gisele, we should hook them up.
That'd be great.
I mean, that's a level of like mutual friend fame. Like I want to run in those circles for like just long enough to get free access to every club in America. My God. Okay.
All right. Those are, hey, friends are key. Friends are key, but so is destiny. I'll be honest. Like it's very clear that they were meant to be together. And so we saw in the earlier episodes of, you know, him living in downtown Boston and partying. What can we say? What can be said of this version of Tom Brady, the family man, and how it changed the trajectory of his career?
I think it planted seeds to the conversations we have right now. Because remember, over the last few years, there's been Gisele wants Tom to retire. Gisele's worried about concussions. Like Gisele, like we hear this, Gisele wants Tom to ... And I think what you saw here was the beginning. Like what we're seeing is the strength of their partnership. And that's a really inspiring thing. But B, it's another factor when you think about who Tom is, what drives Tom, how long is he going to play, what's he do? Like we always talk about Tom, but it became quickly apparent here that Gisele, the personality, is dominant in Tom's life in every great way. So, I mean, to me, Tom, the family man, speaks to Tom, the driven quarterback that's still in the Super Bowl conversation today, partially because of who Gisele is and what this relationship looks like.
Yeah.
As she said when she busts in, behind every strong man, there's a strong woman. And I think their relationship is really what helps Tom Brady keep going, because you reflect the energy of the people that you're most consistently around. And Tom and Gisele have a very similar mindset. They both understood the level of commitment, dedication, and discipline it takes to be good at something. She's one of the best supermodels in the entire world. I mean, think about her upbringing. She lived in a village with 17,000 people, middle child of 6 girls, in a house that had 7 women and 1 man. They were just all in that little home, and she built herself up from the bottom. So she was even worse than a 6th-round draft pick. I mean, she really had to make something out of herself. And
she goosebumps, Scooby. Yes.
But she clearly, she's a very motivated woman who knows what it takes to be successful, and the process it takes, and the dedication it takes. And we learned through this episode that Gisele completely supports Tom Brady to do what she wants, because she walked away from modeling at 24 years old, after doing it for 10 years at 14. And she said, I was at peace with it. I want to do something else with my life. She said, I want him to be fulfilled. And that's what she was able to give for Brady. And he wasn't expecting to meet somebody like this. He didn't want to get married until his late 30s, early 40s. And I love the way that they were set up in their relationship. And it was the first time Brady really had to be in the public eye. She also helped him deal with that, because now he's dating a supermodel, and now everybody in the world is beginning to recognize them, even when they're in Paris. Like, that's crazy. And
and I mean, stick there a second, Scooby, because you're talking about comfortability walking away for something. Like, I watched that and I immediately thought, man, how meaningful is that right now for Tom? Because, when you talk about Gisele walking away from, her career at different points and feeling content and feeling satisfied, like that's, if you're a quarterback trying to figure out, do you want to keep playing? Do you want to move to Tampa Bay? Do you want to play somewhere else? How long do you want to do this? Like, having somebody that's walked away from a dream situation has to be a level of comfort and advisory on how to handle a dream situation now.
Yeah. And I think it's a situation too, to see a dynamic like that. It's such it's a very refreshing thing to watch, is you see 2 incredibly successful people who have reached the peak level of their careers, but have that security and have that support for one another. I think I'm sure we all see it. Like, we're so quick, and we talked about this last episode, to hate or to judge and I think for them, like, they just kind of set this example of, like, you've got your thing, I've got my thing. Together, we're going to be the best at each of our things and respect the heck out of one another and push one another. I think they've both had levels of adversity, but I think Gisele helped Tom in a different way that, he didn't even realize he needed help. And he, we thought he had adversity before, but he had even more adversity coming. And so for most of his career, we hadn't seen an injury sideline him yet, until a strike to his left knee during the season opener against the Kansas City Chiefs. And honestly, watching that, it felt like the world kind of froze as Brady failed to get up. And he was, shrieking. He was nursing his left knee after the hit from the Chiefs, Bernard Pollard. And Brady ended up with season-ending surgery to repair his ACL and MCL on his left knee. And the Pats' redemption season that we talked about in the previous episode, like, they're going to come back, they're going to do this, it was ultimately over. So I want to know what your guys' reaction was when you saw Brady go down with a knee injury.
ACLs were different then, right? Like, that's one thing we got to remember. It's like ACL, MCL. Now we see guys come back from it today. Yeah. And I know this isn't like 20 years ago, but heck, it's getting close to that, right? It was different. And I think watching it as a fan at the time, the first thought for most people was, oh, that's the end of the Patriots. Like, coming off a Super Bowl loss, by the time Brady would be back on the field, would he be himself? They wouldn't have all those offensive weapons anymore. In a salary cap era, you presumed that it was like, Scooby, I thought it was basically going to be the beginning of how many times have I said this in my life? But it's like, well, now Patriots fans will know what the rest of us feel like. And, every time I say that, it turns out that to not be true. But I think that was the sense I had in the moment when it happened, watching it as a fan.
Yeah. I truly believe everything happens for a reason, even though we don't, want to agree with it. And the timing of this injury really got me thinking, especially since we get to see the stages and the timeline of Brady's life. He had just met Gisele, and then he sustains this injury at the beginning of their relationship. And, a very unfortunate injury, but had this injury not happened, where would their relationship be? Because Gisele basically took care of everything for Brady. I mean, they both said it. He would be depressed, laying in bed, couldn't do anything. He said he was gray, 3 surgeries on his knee, and because he was aggressive and walking around the house, and eventually developed a staph infection, which is very serious, mind you.
Serious,
and then eventually, he said that she basically helped keep him up. She was a reason why he didn't stay too down on himself. And you got to think about the conversations that they have and how she kept him motivated and how she just kept his spirits up. And that's very important because, as you mentioned, Fitz, an injury like that at that point in time, especially now that technology has gotten better, it's a lot more serious to have torn your ACL and MCL during that time in history. And then this offseason, before the next season comes, they get married. And you got to think that time they spent together because of Brady's injury really helped pick up the speed of their relationship and help the quality of their time be even better, which eventually led to their marriage.
I feel and think about this too, like when you combine all of that with what we talked about last episode. Because he said, I don't know, if I'd won the Super Bowl and not lost to the Giants, maybe I only played for a few more years. Maybe I would have been content. If he was coming off of this massive Super Bowl undefeated season, accomplished everything he's accomplished, and now his knee's just torn to shreds, much easier in that situation to be like, man, I've done everything I could possibly do. Maybe it's time to hang him up. And instead, you combine the fact, to your point, Scooby, that there's almost like, to use an analogy everybody understands now, like, there's a COVID acceleration to your relationship. You've spent just ungodly amount of time together. So now you've been accelerated and all of a sudden, but you've also got that fire. Like, man, that could have accelerated him to decide he wanted to do TV too, if he wasn't as hungry after a Super Bowl loss. So I think all of these things, yet again, we say with Tom Brady and the Patriots in general, like it takes all of these little things coming together at once to create the madness that we have.
Well, and I feel like it's that destiny thing. And it's as Scooby, you said that everything happens for a reason. And I feel like all of the events afterwards, it was only just adding to this greatness that Tom Brady has created even to this day. And back to the quote that Gisele said, behind every strong man is a strong woman. I think, they took that vow of in sickness and health before they even were married very seriously. And so I feel like all things considered, Brady then returned to the field the following season in great form after fully recovering from the knee injury and the infection. And after that season, the Pats didn't miss the playoffs again with Brady as their QB. I'd say he for sure came back even stronger. And so we kind of get to the Patriots 2.0 and the return to the Super Bowl. And Brady says that, losing to the Giants in the Super Bowl was a hard pill to swallow. And for Brady, as we've all seen, it's the arrow effect when he's hit with adversity, when he's hit with doubt, when he's hit, with that losing feeling, he comes back stronger. And so we see now the emergence of Patriots 2.0 stacked with Gronk, Hernandez getting a chance to redeem themselves against the Giants in the Super Bowl. And then we watch Brady lose another Super Bowl, and to who else but Eli and the Giants. So what was it like watching the meltdown of the Patriots? And I'm going to call it a meltdown. Come at me. That, what was it like watching that meltdown of the Pats in this game that meant so much? And why does Brady have trouble beating the Giants in Super Bowls?
I mean, my God, if anybody can figure out what the Giants methodology is, like, I would love to hear it because, and I will say a little context with the season that he missed. I mean, Brady missed the entire season. The Patriots went 11-5 without him and missed the playoffs. So they didn't miss the playoffs because they were a bad team. They missed the playoffs because that was a stacked year in the AFC. And in fact, it resulted in a lot of guys getting paid. Like Matt Castle got some money off of that year run. So the Patriots managed to stay very good without Brady. And then he put Brady back on it, and it did feel like they picked up where they left off. They were fine. They were great. They were amazing. Certain teams can just get in your head. And we're used to seeing it divisionally. Like, anybody knows that, like, I would argue that Dolphins fans are sitting there saying, why can we never beat the Patriots? I would argue this year we're seeing Bills fans more often than not saying, why is it so tough to beat the Patriots? Like, everybody looks at like somebody in their division and says, why does that organization just know the Giants? They have it. And you know, I always go back to what Mike Golick Jr., our mutual friend, said about the year that they lost the national championship to Alabama. And he said, some teams beat you when they walk off the bus because they're in your head the minute they walk off the bus. I think the Giants were still in the Patriots' heads over a Super Bowl, over an undefeated team. And go back to what we saw the very first year, the very first episode of Man in the Arena, when he was in the tunnel and was too pumped up. And I forget who, Willie McGinnis, I think, was the one that said, hey, you got to calm down. We need you to be you right now. I think the whole team needed to calm down in that Giants' second attempt to win. It's just in their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to turn it on after the first original Giant loss, and they got to where they were. And to go against the Giants again and lose, man, that was tough. It was hopeful revenge for all of us. Gisele said, like, this is the game. There was just so much pressure going into that game because they felt like this is your opportunity to make up for that loss. And I love how you said it was Patriots 2.0, Victoria, because that's literally what I had in my notes. Bill Belichick, kind of came in and was like, listen. And I loved how Brady said it. He was like, we're in shotgun too much. We're going to draft some tight ends. We're going to run our 12 personnel, and we are going to have one running back, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and that's what we're going to do. And then this Bill O'Brien and Tom Brady relationship, loved that, by the way, which was hilarious, how they called him the teapot and everything. But that relationship grows. We see how that offense became. Brady took over the offense and really kind of became that leader. And then throughout this time where he took over the offense in a way and worked in collaboration, Brady, man, he had some blunders in some games, and you hear him really being tough on himself. He would say poopy throws and poopy this, you know what I mean? But the S word is really what he said. But to lose that game, it was tough to watch that part too. But you saw that bow and arrow effect, and you know that he still comes back and somehow wins another Super Bowl.
Well, and Scooby, you just made a great point that we should really give a little love here too. Like, when you talk about the way they rebuilt their roster and bringing in 2 tight ends, like, I always say, I think great coaches are like the TV show Chopped on Food TV. You open up a basket of ingredients, you say, what do we have and how do I cook with this? But so often coaches in the NFL are formulaic. Hey, this is my offense. This is the way I run it. Like, we've seen that in, let's look at modern teams. Like, Sean McVay and the Rams are going to do a Sean McVay offense, right? And when they're not a successful team, the answer is always, well, we didn't have the right personnel to run Sean McVay's offense. Not taking anything away from it. That's just his methodology. What's impressive out of this is yet a third different approach to how to win a Super Bowl that we've seen, because we saw the Patriots in their first iteration needed to get a little bit more toughness, right? And they were going to figure out how to be the best version of that they could be. Then we see the Randy Moss where it's like, now we're going to spread everything out. We're going to beat people that way. Now you're a couple years later and you're like, I'm tired of the spread it out thing. Let's go 2 tight ends and get back to that. Like, we have seen Belichick constantly look at the league and say, I won't be defined by what I do. I'll let what I do define the NFL. Like, that's a substantial difference in coaching.
And then one thing, I love that we get little pieces of Bill Belichick throughout this documentary, and I wish he was in it talking a little bit more. But before that 18-win season, Bill Belichick busted in that door. Hey, everybody else hasn't been in shape. I'm talking about when they came out the lockout. Everybody else hasn't been in shape. Now we're going to run a spread offense. We're going to do things really fast. Comes in, hey, we need to get the 2 tight ends, do this. He's always thinking football. And I wonder what he came into this season with Mac Jones into Josh McDaniels' offense. Hey, we got a rookie quarterback. We're going to do things this way. He always has an idea. I love it.
Well, and I think
if this series is called Man in the Arena, would the Belichick series be called like Grump on the Sideline? Like, I just, I mean, I guess we could go hoodie on the sideline, and maybe that's less,
Well, and Scooby, you mentioned the lockout, so I want to circle back before we kind of land the plane here. Is we compare Brady to a lot of greats, but something that really stood out to me in this episode was during the lockout, Brady decides to get his teammates working out at Boston College while they waited for negotiations to end. So he's running 7-on-7, team drills, individual drills, even conditioning, so that by the time the season returned, the Pats were a step ahead of everyone. So as a high level QB, how does Brady continue to reinvent his effectiveness on and off the field?
Is that reinvention, or is that just,
I think that's
like, honestly, if you look though, like, what did we learn in the first couple episodes? Every Tuesday he sits down with Belichick. What have we learned about Brady? Brady's essentially a coach. And I think when we look at Brady and when we look at Peyton, frankly, one of the things that was really powerful about both of them is the power that they had in calling the game plan they want to call, right? Like, they have so much control over it. So, I mean, any quarterback can get their team together at a local park and say, we're going to work out every week. How many quarterbacks can do that have as much knowledge of the offense as a coach would? And I think this comes back to the culture that was built for years of that Tuesday meeting. And now it's not just Brady that everybody respects calling everybody together, Scooby. It's also like Brady, the quarterback, that's also Brady, the assistant coach, that can also tell you where you were supposed to line up because he's been sitting in with the coaches every Tuesday to figure this stuff out. Like, I think it's a body of work that says, okay, now I'm going to stand up and I'm not just going to be a leader in the sense of quarterback's a leader. I'm going to be a coach too. Like, I think that's the power there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when they got together to work out, and Brady said he got a universal response from the team. He didn't realize that everybody would show up the way that they did. And it did give them that extra step because, as I mentioned, Bill came in and straight up told Brady, listen, everybody hasn't been on top of what we need to steal at least 3 or 4 games early in the year just because we're in more shape than the teams. And we're going to work really hard in training camp. So they had worked really hard together in the offseason. Hence, other teams hadn't done that. And then they get together in training camp and even take it up another notch with Bill leading the way. So I love how Brady basically started that by being a great leader with his team. And then they just really turned it on when it came down to the season. I mean, that first game against the Dolphins, they said that they were running those guys off the field to the point where their no huddle was so fast that the outside guy would be left uncovered and Brady would just throw it to him. Like, we weren't even running plays. We were like, oh, snap, there's nobody in front of them because they're tired. Just throw them the rock. And they were moving the ball fast. And that's a total different level of domination early on in the season when you're just in such better than the other team that they can't even keep up.
And that speaks to respect too, y'all. Like, let's just be real about it. And we can use ESPN as an example. I think it's fair to say there are certain people at ESPN out like I'll use Nagandi and L. Duncan as an example. If ESPN was totally dark and it was, hey, nobody's going to work for the next month, and we got a text from L and Nagandi that said, hey, we're showing up at this place and we're all going to run Sports Center reps and we're going to do it every day. You're going to put in the work. Every one of us would show up because, like, we would show up and say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, what do you need next and what do we have to do? And that's because of the culture that they create around them every day with the work they put in. Like, again, I don't know that a lesser quarterback, like I feel like we constantly talk about how all the things, you said destiny early, how all the things have to be lined up the right way. You have to have a quarterback that has the proof of concept, that has the respect in the room, that has the, I know the playbook better than everybody, that has the, I sent a text and you are going to be there. And that's rare. That's a body of work that gives you that opportunity. That's nothing about that one day, that one offseason. That's about a body of dang work that most quarterbacks don't have at that point.
Well, it defines greatness. Like, Brady is the definition of greatness, not just as a player, but as a leader, as someone who puts the team first, who puts people and who holds people accountable. And that's the definition of the great ones. That's how legends are born, legends are made, legends are solidified. And I think that was another moment where you're like, yeah, he is the GOAT, because he is constant. Everyone could have very easily, all right, we got to wait for it to happen. He was like, no, guys, we're going to be ready. Like, I love that saying. I put it on a sticky note and it says, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I feel like he's like the definition of that. So he's never had to kind of fall behind. And so that leads us to, something we do every week, pick our favorite parts. I'd say that's collectively one of all of our favorite parts, but Fitz, hit me first. What was your favorite part from episode 5?
I mean, my favorite part, honestly, was, Gisele, who we've covered a lot, but also hearing Tom talk about family, because I think to me, it's and I don't have kids. So, like, for me, I'm not one of those people that's sitting here getting sentimental because, oh my God, he's talking about family. But for me, those little moments speak to growth. And the version of Tom, like Tom talking about his life in episode 1, 2, 3, all had a very different tone than Tom talking about his life in episode 4. And that to me just really like that hit, not just Gisele being funny, but the way that Tom sort of talked about the adjustment and the way that Tom talked about what it meant at this point to be a husband and all of these things, like that's just a different level of Tom. So for me, that was probably the moment that I sat there and said, oh man, we're watching something different.
Yeah. What about you, Skubie?
For me, it was the guests of the episode, and that goes Gisele, Wes Welker, and Bill O'Brien. Their relationships with Tom Brady. It was Tom Brady, the one that is now taking over the offense, basically co-offensive coordinator. Tom Brady, the quarterback who has now become best friends with Wes Welker, and Tom Brady, the husband / father with his wife, Gisele. Getting to see all those three versions was really interesting because his relationship with Wes Welker, they basically thought the same way. And I loved how Wes Welker's and Tom Brady's interaction would be put onto the screen, especially when Wes Welker was like, listen, Tom, I'm open every play. He's like, I know, buddy. He's like, every play. And I was like, Wes Welker's tapped. I love that relationship. And then his relationship with Bill O'Brien, how he came in there and said one of the things about Tom Brady actually have to learn right away is he's a very creative mind. When he has a football idea, you have to work with him and let him be him. And I just thought back to that's probably what he got onto the same thing with Bruce Arians last year when they won the Super Bowl, because it seemed like Bruce was trying to be like, I'm the coach. And then he was like, you know what, let's work collaborative together. And then his relationship with Gisele on how she is his rock and how she kind of kept him up. And not only when Tom Brady had to all of a sudden go back to his ex-girlfriend because she had a kid, she stuck there with him. I think
that was early on in their relationship too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think at that moment, it was also a huge level of respect for each other and the type of commitment that she had towards him, which also increased the type of level of commitment they have towards anything in their lives, because that energy transpires. So that whole relationship with Gisele, even after both Super Bowl losses, I mean, she stuck with him. And even when Brady lost that game and she was like, what are you thinking of? And she was like, oh, that stupid football game. But Benny, look at him. He kind of keeps me up. So his kids, his wife, you saw those are the things, those are the secret shifters in Brady's life. Those are the things that help push him back up. And she said he always gets down, but he eventually just kind of comes out of his spot and ends up being stronger than he was before. Sometimes it takes a little bit more than others. And Brady has shown us a lot of life lessons. I've said it on multiple episodes.
That's where I was about to go, yeah.
Yeah, he says what happened yesterday is the past. Only thing you can do is take from it and learn the lessons. And I think I saw a side of Brady in terms of just learning how to deal with things that really crushed you and how do you move on from it. And he just continuously preaches about letting the past be the past and moving on and still somehow coming out stronger.
Well, I love that. I think everything you both said just summed it up for me too. But Look, I was a fan of Brady and Gisele before watching this show. I'm such a fan now, but I'm also such a fan of the example and the message. This show, I mean, I think we all can agree we are all very thoroughly enjoying it. And not just because it's our job, but it's an amazing show. And it's a situation where you're learning so much, but you leave each episode, and this one too, being like, you've learned something or you're inspired. And the two of them are such an example of that strong, that supportive relationship that I feel like a lot of people don't realize that exists. Like the uber successful supermodel, Super Bowl winning, QB, taking that out. These are two humans who respect the heck out of one another, help one another, and stand by one another through the tough times that I think now more than ever we can learn from, and we can respect even more, and we can really, be inspired by. And so I could go on and on and on about it, but we don't have any more time. So that's going to do it for us for now. Thanks for watching After the Arena, presented by Under Armour. He's Skubie, he's Jason, I'm Victoria. Be sure to catch us next week after episode 6 of Man in the Arena.